Hello, this is Peregrine. For folks who are new to the dirt and free herbal arts ecosystem, I'm a spiritual and clinical herbalist, and I'm based in so-called Durham, North Carolina. I am really looking forward to this conversation. We are going to be talking with one of my dear friends, Tiffany Wong, who I think of as an artist who is really constantly uplifting and advocating for truth in ways that are deeply personal and aspirationally brave. And she works in many modalities. I have had the pleasure to participate in some of her art making and journaling sessions that she hosts virtually for people of color. And also, I subscribe to your Substack. And so I get to listen in and read your writing that is so inspiring to me. And Tiffany is just someone I love to collaborate with as well. So we're actually right now in the process of putting together an introspective intensive that we're going to share about a little later. I'm honored overall to know you in this timeline, Tiffany. Do you want to take the mic and just introduce yourself in your own words?
Yay, I'm so glad to be here. It's such an honor to share space with you in as a friend, but also as a facilitator, collaborator. Um, yeah, I'm Tiffany. I am a Chinese interdisciplinary artist, and I have spent the past many years, more than a decade, of seeing art and creativity as a way to deepen my values and to be closer in relationship with my body. And I see art as a microcosm of our lives as a whole. So the things that I want to be in my world, in my bigger world, like to be brave in truth, I practice it in my creativity practices. And yeah, and I hold space so that we can do that together where we can deepen our embodied values through creativity and through honesty, bravery, vulnerability.
So beautiful. Thank you for being here. We're going to be talking today about shame. I'm so honestly so lucky that Tiffany said yes to having this conversation, and I'm so nervous because my work, I don't think that I usually go this deep into the very personal aspects of my work. I kind of leave it to the plants. And yes, there are spiritual aspects, there are physical aspects around shame and the experiences overall of making mistakes and just being humans in this world that plants can support us with. I really have noticed that I don't spend a lot of time diving deep with my audience about what's going on inside of Peregrine as I'm navigating the things that we are all navigating. So I'm grateful, I'm nervous, I'm excited, all the things. And I guess to give some context for our conversation, I'm going to do it through a story, and Tiffany already knows this story, but I recently was in the process of launching a really big project, something that I was pouring my heart and soul into and really trying to be as generous as possible, reflecting on how this is 10 plus years that I've been studying and practicing herbalism. And I think 2 years since I launched my practice in free herbal arts. I was like, this is kind of like a big live thing where I pour into my community. And I'm still really excited to do that. And I kind of gave my patrons a little teaser and announced that this would happen on the 16th. And it is not going to happen on the 16th of August. So I wanted to share why. In the process of launching this project, I had this conversation with my sister, my younger sister, who is in creative direction in a big animation company. She's amazing. And she was like, "Oh, I can be really helpful with this, like the digital marketing piece, which is something that I am still trying to grow into and learn a lot more about, even though I've been doing my own marketing for so long. I'm realizing there's still so much to learn." And so I said, yeah, I love feedback. And I showed my sister all of my launch materials, my landing page, my, Instagram carousels and kind of the all of the copy that I had written to promote this session. And in the feedback session, she would give me all of these recommendations, ideas, suggestions. And I noticed that each time she said something, I felt resistance, even though I knew that I wanted the feedback and I knew that I was open to the feedback. And in my mind, everything that she said was logical. It made sense. I wanted to grow in that direction, but I also felt stuck. Like in the resistance, I felt myself shrinking. I felt myself like tender in my heart space. And so I knew that there was an emotional component, like an emotional attachment to um, whatever was coming up in this feedback session. And so I got quickly overwhelmed on the call. We got off the call and I heard myself say, oh shit, maybe I can't do this. maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm not XYZ enough to do this. Like I'm not enough. And I felt shame. And it caught me off guard because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I know shame. I've worked with shame. I already, whatever, like transformed and healed all that shame. And I realized it was coming up probably because I was trying to grow and change and do something different. And I also realized that if I was feeling this much resistance and emotional attachment and the constriction and the shrinking that I associate with shame in the context of sharing about this very important project in a very loving environment with someone I'm very close to, then scaling that with this launch, scaling my business, scaling the attention that I might receive through this launch, through this project could really hurt me. It might, I might get stuck. I might not be able to bounce back right away from whatever feedback, positive or negative or in between, that I might receive from a larger audience of people who, mostly don't know me or have a reason to care about me at all. And so instead of bypassing that shame and trying to push myself through with the launch because I had all the external stuff, like I knew what I was going to talk about. I knew, the pictures I was going to share, the stories I was going to share. Instead of pushing myself through with the launch, I realized that I actually not abandoning myself in this moment meant that I want to pivot toward the shame and spend more time with it and really see what's there. Because what I've learned in my life is that when we get the support that we need and shine the light on the shame, that's when we are better able to receive the medicine from the experience and grow. And yeah, when it comes to public facing work and my audience, our audiences, I think are both really intuitive. Like when I think of my dream clients, when I think of my dream customers, these are folks who are deeply intuitive and wanting to move more and more in that direction of truth. And on some level, I think that they would be able to see right through whatever digital marketing spectacle that I came up with and worked really hard on to what's really at the core. And so yeah, I was like, okay, here we are again, Peregrine, with the shame, with the old patterns. I let myself feel discouraged and slept on it. And from there, this is where I am now. I'm choosing to be curious because I know that I have transformed shame before. So I thought that this would be the perfect opportunity to record a conversation with Tiffany. We both love the podcast format, so we're going to do like a little bit of audio visual stuff. And it's also it's Leo season as we're recording this. Today is actually my sister's birthday. And so it feels really funny and really fitting to do this on this day and just lean into and talk with other courageous hearts about shame and pick your brilliant brain because you do talk and write so much about attuning to our internal landscapes and not just in like the sacred spaces that we cultivate for ourselves, but ultimately through the dysregulating circumstances of our lives in order to recenter ourselves in moving in more loving ways and being in more loving ways.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your real life example. I feel like what you felt is so real. And also, happy birthday to sister. Can
Let her know.
I ask you a couple follow-up questions with that example?
Yes.
What indicated to you that it was shame, like in that experience? Like what are some like your own telltale signs of like, oh, that's shame popping up?
Oh, it's such a good question. I was actually going to ask you this question too. Like the embodiment of shame. And yeah, does it show up differently for each of us? What I noticed in my body, I think I mentioned this part, is the shrinking.
Mhm.
There's like both an energetic experience of shrinking where I think this is the discouragement. I feel discouraged. And so I feel small.
Mhm.
And then there is also a physical sense of shrinking, my my energy is being concentrated, my body is being concentrated. Like I actually watched this video recently of Peter Levine, who is the founder of, somatic experiencing, and he was talking about toxic shame and guided the YouTube audience to like crouch down and kind of round our shoulders, round our spine, and like bring our chins towards our chest and feel that experience. That's the shrinking. That's like totally the way that I start to hold myself when I'm moving with shame.
Yeah.
And I also will frequently feel like everyone who knows me knows this. I'll talk about how my butt is clenched. I feel like, because it's like the shame goes down into the root
Mm.
for so many of us. And for myself, there's like a childhood element to it. There's like something in early life that was, this message that we inherited that is the root of the shame that in toxic shame begins to repeat itself. And so I feel it in my root like a constriction, and it's
Mm,
always that constriction. And the tightness is also like it shows up in my actions where, oh, I can't move forward
mm.
until, or like I can't move forward because there's not enough of me. Like I'm not enough.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that's so real. And wait, can I have ask one more question?
Yes. I love it.
When you say that you lean into that the shame or like that experience of shame physically and like practically, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I feel that a big part of it is slowing down
Mhm.
because I know that I'm a very, we have talked about this recently, but when I want to do something, I'm going to go and do it. And there's an element of I'm all like, my constitution is all earth and fire. And so I will really like, I'll push, I'll expect resistance, I'll keep pushing through it and just keep going. And I know that sometimes when I feel the constriction, it is possible for me to just continue on and just push through the constriction. And what I've noticed, like in terms of projects and work and day-to-day life, relationships, and what I've noticed is that doesn't actually relieve any constriction. It just causes more and more constriction so that it climbs like up from my root into my rib cage and I start to feel constriction around my heart and I can't be as generous with other people as I want to be, or like it'll come up to my shoulders and then I'll have shoulder tension and neck tension and jaw tension and then I can't sleep. And that's what happens when I push through it. And so my process begins with slowing down and recognizing that slowing down is not stopping. It's just taking assessment. And then from there, if I can look into my body and see those signs, the constricted root, the clenched jaw, the I can't or I should or I shouldn't, like those messages start to also come up in my mind. If I can notice all of those signs, then I can name, oh, I'm starting to move through what could be a shame spiral. So
Mm.
there's something there that needs to come to the light.
Ooh, juicy.
Juicy, juicy. We really dove right in. I was like, let's start with some definitions. What is shame? But I wonder if do you want to part of what we do in our collaborations too is we invite people to define some of the core concepts that we're working through in their own words and like with their own associations. So I wonder if you want to maybe guide us through your definitions and associations of shame.
Yeah. It's interesting because this morning was thinking about shame. I always think about shame as something that is really negative because how I have defined shame is something that makes me feel like I have less value. But I'm wondering if to myself if I can pivot to really seeing it more as a sensation than it is even about the belief of who I am or my value or my worth because I think that for me, at least now, that rings a little bit truer.
Yeah.
And obviously, what I know intellectually doesn't always land the same in the body, and maybe that is the truth of like my body isn't convinced in its worthiness.
Mm.
But I do feel like I want to challenge myself of seeing shame in a little bit more nuanced way. And even maybe it could be a helpful thing. I'm reading Wretched of the Earth right now, and it touches a little bit about how shame can be something that is used for revolution. And I'm like, that's not something I would have said before.
Mm.
And now I'm like, I'm curious about it. I'm curious to learn about it and also to see if that could be true within myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, but definitely shame is the sensation that is at first a shrinking, like how you said. But for me, it then gets really big
Mm.
and expands almost in a very like aggressive way
Mm.
and almost like a tantrum, like a child tantrum of like I feel this thing and I feel small and then I want to like
Oh,
attack.
oh, fascinating.
And I've seen over like the span of my lifetime how that small then really trying to be really big to combat the smallness is
Mm.
repetitive.
Like this pendulum swing.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, just swinging between different extremes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what about you?
That resonates. That for sure resonates. It's really helpful to think about shame as not necessarily a negative experience. What I wanted to title this talk is All Parts of Me Are Medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think of shame as being one of those experiences or emotions or sensations that if we are to pivot towards it, we learn so much more about ourselves and how we see the world and what we want for our lives
Yeah.
instead of letting shame consume us so that we become the shame, we become the pathology. Like you were saying, shame can become or can be thought of as like, this is my worth or this is not my worth. It's just another experience that we have where if we can continue to turn back towards ourselves in a loving way. And for me, like it's a very spiritual, the way that I practice herbalism is like we are of the earth and the earth is everything. The earth is so generous. The earth gives us life, gives us food, gives us energy. And if we are of the earth, then we also are connected to that infinite source of creative energy. And that is the energy of love. And so if I really truly believe that, and this is like the part of like connecting actions to values, if I really truly believe that, then what do I need to do in order to pivot outside of this all-consuming experience of shame and turn loving attention to
Yeah.
me?
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I totally agree. Like it's just a director, a pointer to a desire or a need that I want to have met. And it doesn't have to be super, super, super deep, even though it might symbolize a lot of deep things and really big, important things. But like, is a pointer that something within me is desiring
Mm,
XYZ. Yeah. And to be able, I said this to um, my partner the other day of like, I'm just trying to practice being really comfortable in the discomfort of growth
yeah.
and to be able to sit in it, like you said, like just be in it for just a little bit longer because I want to be rooted in the fact that like I know where I am going spiritually. I like my purpose is clear and that the trust that I have in myself and in my community isn't based on what is predictable or even known, but it's based on where what we're building.
Mm,
And I feel like with shame, it's like being able to hold that moment for a little bit longer, like is rooted in that.
mm. Are you open to giving an example of how you have worked with or transformed shame in this way in your life?
Yeah. So recently, I went through a rupture with a friend, and it crossed a boundary that was based in value for me. But during the talks and during the exploration of what is here, I did feel that sensation come up within me, and it felt like like a little like it was more burning like in my center. It was like very like inflamed.
Mm, mm,
And while I knew what I stood for, I'm 10 toes down. And that it's not about that, but it was bringing up that feeling. And that feeling led me to remember that this feeling is very familiar. It has come up a lot in situations where I felt like totally misunderstood and made out to be someone who is too extreme, too harsh, not understanding, not being able to see the other side. When I felt like in my heart, I knew what my North Star is.
mm,
I wasn't willing to compromise on it. But especially when I'm back at home in the Bay Area where my biological parents live, it's the feeling where you're outnumbered really about like if I'm the only one in the room that that feels or has this North Star, it's like very isolating.
yeah.
And while that isn't true in this situation, I have people with aligned values and aligned belief systems. Um, it still kind of triggered that feeling, that very familiar feeling that I've had many, very, very many times. And so it was like interesting for me to like see what that shame was pointing to of there's still so much grief in it for all those other times that it has happened and all the times it probably will happen. And also it feels bad to be seen in that way. And while I accept it 100% of like I don't have the belief where I need to convince people otherwise, or I don't have the desire to control other people's beliefs or lens of how they see the world. I still would like to be heard and understood.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure they feel the same way, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's interesting this past time of like, ooh, that's a familiar feeling. I know this feeling. I know the sensation.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Such a tricky situation where we are like inherently craving connection and acceptance. And when the person that we are interacting with, when there can't be that mutual connection and acceptance, it makes sense that it would trigger these feelings of isolation and rejection that we have experienced in the past.
Yeah, yeah. And for it to touch on something that's so familiar is an interesting thing because I think part of the shame is like, aren't we over that? Haven't we led a life so that we can diminish that?
Hmm.
And I think it was good for me to address like, no, that actually isn't the goal.
Mm,
The goal isn't to diminish that friction or that misunderstanding, but it is to stand firm and be rooted in what I believe and in my integrity, and to be vulnerable and brave to have relationships, have connections, and have camaraderie.
yes. So inspiring. I seriously always admire the ways that you navigate relationships internally and interpersonally. And it's very clear in the art that you create and the spaces that you facilitate and just the way that you move through the world, how the internal work connects and fuels or feeds into all of our work to collective movement. I almost just was like, and our liberatory imagination. Ding. We did it anyway.
Oh, and one more thing I wanted to add, if I may,
Yes.
is that I felt that the expansion within me,
Mm,
and I felt the thing that I wanted to do, which is to punish this person
mm,
and to like really make their experience way worse, and to like almost have this like um yeah, I don't know, bulldozing sort of effect.
mhm.
And it really took everything in me to address that within myself of like, that's not what I believe.
Yeah.
That's I don't I believe in abolition. That means that I don't believe that punitive actions and behaviors are necessary, are helpful, are transformative. So like I needed to address that, but I had to like address it. I want them to feel punished. I want them to actually suffer, and to be like, okay, now that you've addressed it, now I can keep myself accountable to the words and to what I do.
Mm.
Yeah, but that's where that shame wanted to like
Yeah.
express.
Yeah. It's like project itself onto somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
To like zoom into that moment where you realize this is the pattern of shame to spill out onto this other person. And then at the same time realizing, or maybe it's not at the same time, realizing this is not aligned with your values. What is that process like? Is that something that you process outside of the conversation with your friend? Like you're taking some space to process that inside of yourself, or maybe it's like both. There's something that you do in that moment as you're talking to your friend that helps you to pivot.
If you all hear background noise, someone is cutting a tree down outside of my window, so that's that. But to answer your question, what usually happens is that I like to talk to my trusted people about the circumstance and be really, really, really honest about the things that are coming up for me. So with this past situation, I had to like admit like there's this thing that I want to punish them for. I feel this thing that I want to jab. I want to make the experience worse, and I needed to externalize it. And yeah, but I want to hold myself accountable. I want my people to hold myself accountable because I do not want to actually do that. So I need to release it. And I wrote about it. So I feel like externalizing and releasing it, and also being like, yeah, that makes sense that I feel these sensations coming up because it's a sensation that makes me want to reclaim, um, myself, or like to, instead of being small, to be able to expand. And so I needed to reassure myself, I am here. I am my normal size, you know what I mean? And it really helped. And I feel like when I was in those conversations, to notice that that sensation of wanting to override and to punish wasn't there that much in that room or in those rooms. Yeah. So that's a little bit of my experience.
That's so beautiful and speaks so much to what we always talk about with each other and also in the spaces that we co-facilitate around how important it is for us to be ourselves in community and really cultivate these trusted spaces where we have people, mirrors, including ourselves, who know us deeply and know our purpose and know what we want and who we are and what we say that we stand for. And yeah, like we are responsible for our own actions. We are not responsible for other people's actions. But when we are connected with people, when there is relationship, when there is love and care, it opens up space for us to weave into each other's webs of responsibility so that when we inevitably mess up or forget ourselves or get, consumed by these really big emotions and experiences, many of which, like shame included, are enforced and encouraged by empire and those powers of capitalism, racial capitalism, colonialism, that we're able to come back to our right size and move forward
Yeah.
intact. I feel like there is so much around shame that's like a fragmentation of the
Yeah.
self.
Like a chopping up of ourselves, of like, I need to hide this part or I need to reject this part. And I love how you titled our the talk or the series of like all parts of ourselves are medicine, because that is so true. And talk about colonialism, like especially of people as people of color, we have been so deeply conditioned to reject ourselves as a whole, to reject parts of ourselves, to elevate, one piece of ourselves higher than the other
Yeah.
parts. And it's like, no, even when shame comes up, when those things, those punitive thoughts come up, well, one, that's not who I am. And two, I can look at it and not be afraid of it.
Yes. This feels like a good time for us to move into a little teaser of our upcoming, we're calling it an introspective intensive. And so it's a very, very much aligned with the conversation that we're having today around moving through the internal landscape, shame being just one part of that. But Tiffany, do you want to share more about our upcoming offering?
Yeah, it's titled I Make Mistakes. And in our intensive, which is going to be over 4.5 hours.
4.5 hours. It's our biggest offering yet.
Yeah, I've never done something like this personally. So I'm
Mm-mm.
really excited because we always talk about how a lot of times workshops, there is a intellectual part, a learning part, and then there's a little bit of a practice part, like we write or something. But this one is really going to be very, very spacious, where we're going to dive into what mistakes and about shame and about narratives and patterns. But there will be so much time to sit within every single part and to be in relationship and conversation with our bodies as we explore these themes. And especially when it comes to making mistakes, I think that we all deserve to honor ourselves in a way that is more spacious and a little slower. But yeah, we're gonna also create our own rituals around when we make mistakes. How can we have these supportive pieces so we can be held and to be accountable, self accountable? Yeah, do you want to say a little more, Peregrine?
Yes, and we're doing it all together. So it'll be what I'm hoping is that it'll be a good balance of internal introspection and then optional sharing and witnessing of also BIPOC-only space. So this is a space that is exclusively for people of color, Black folks, Indigenous people, people who have experienced racialized violence.
We decided for it to be BIPOC only because it's a tender spot to think about shame and also think about mistakes. And so, yeah, I think that to eliminate the part where we don't have to hold space for white people in their mistakes, and you know what I mean, I think that it's going to be really supportive for us. And yeah, I'm really excited.
So if you're someone who is aware maybe of some patterns that you have in relationships that you want to spend some time with, not even necessarily change them, but to spend some time with in supportive space and create your own new rituals for navigating complex relational situations in the chaotic times that we have in front of us. Please come through.
Yeah, I would love to have you. You'll be so held in that space. And also, one note is that mistakes can be so many different things and can not just be relational with other people, but it can be within ourselves. So I think about self betrayal
Yes.
as a mistake that comes up a lot for me.
Yes, me too. Stay tuned and keep a lookout for our announcements for this intensive. Again, it's called I Make Mistakes for People Who Make Mistakes, which is all of us. Before we close out this conversation for now, for people who are unfamiliar with your work, Tiffany, how can they get connected with you?
Yeah, I am all over the place. I have Instagram. I have a Substack that I don't really post about on Instagram. And you can sign up for my newsletter where I send out emails about events that I do.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me.